All right, I believe we are live. Hello, GMAT Club. We are so excited to be streaming with you. Today, we're going to talk about the Stern MBA experience and how you can transform your career with Stern's EQ-powered network. My name is Lindsay Loyd, and I'm the Executive Director of Full-Time MBA Admissions at NYU Stern. Joining me today on the stream is NYU Stern alum Tibby Iz from the class of 2017. We also have Neji, a colleague from my admissions team, behind the scenes and in the chat to help facilitate Q&A. You are welcome to ask questions at any time using the Q&A feature. We will do our best to cover as many questions as we can. Towards the end of our hour together, I'm going to touch briefly on the admissions process and our application and share some key contact information for any follow-up questions. So to recap today, in case you joined late, we're talking about how you can transform your career with Stern's EQ-powered network. Neji, if you could please bring up the slides. And I'm going to jump ahead to slide 3. At Stern, we seek exceptional individuals who possess both intellectual and interpersonal strengths. We call this IQ plus EQ, and it is at the core of everything that we do. EQ, or emotional intelligence, means we're tuning in with self-awareness and empathy, embracing and working within diverse teams, and being comfortable with getting a little uncomfortable and really leaning into challenges. As much as technology and AI are transforming the business world, we know that having strong EQ is what empowers leaders to tackle our biggest challenges. Those that succeed will be skilled at working in the world of big data and analytics, and then translating that to human insights and actions. We spend a great deal of time and effort to bring in a class of students who are going to inspire and challenge and support one another to collectively achieve their goals. Your fellow classmates, the Stern faculty and staff, and the Stern Alumni Network will support you while you are at school and beyond. At NYU Stern, we have over 40 student clubs covering a multitude of professional, affinity, and special interests. Our professional clubs provide forums for students to hear from business leaders and offer opportunities that leverage Stern's New York City location and NYU Stern's global alumni network. Our affinity clubs serve as professional, educational, and social forums that celebrate the student body's diversity of cultural backgrounds and experiences. Lastly, our special interest clubs really foster community at Stern through events that combine both educational and social engagement. At Stern, we pride ourselves on being a place where everyone can be themselves, and having a community that's built on the foundation of IQ plus EQ is what makes that possible. Now, at this point, I'm ready to take a break from the slides, and we're going to hear from Tibby about her experience with Stern's EQ-powered network, both as a student and now as an alum. So, Tibby, if you could start us off by telling us a bit about what you were doing before Stern, what you've been doing since Stern, and if you remember, what you were doing when you found out you got into Stern.
Sure. Well, thank you, Lindsay. It's really great to be here. Hi to everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you today. And really excited to talk to a group of people who are at that point before their MBA experience. I always like to say when I'm talking to people sort of at this start of their journey that I'm really jealous of you, that it's like a really exciting time, a lot to look forward to. What I was doing when I was in your position, before my Stern experience, I was working in advertising. And actually, prior to that, I had been working in the entertainment industry, both kind of on the business side and the creative side. It's a tough business. I wanted to still stay in the world of narratives and creativity, but also root myself further in business. So I pivoted to the advertising industry, which was really great because advertising is essentially the entertainment industry, but with the business element to it, working with business clients, but still getting to create stories and narratives that help their business initiatives. So I was doing that for several years in a lot of different roles, kind of in the client management side, a little bit on the creative side, on the strategy side. It was a great kind of springboard for the rest of my career. I wanted to pivot from that to go client side, to continue in the world of marketing and advertising, but at a big player with big stakes. I was really into the digital side of things, so I was really looking to go to big tech. And I went to Stern to make that pivot. Stern was really pivotal in that pivot. I ended up doing my MBA internship at Google in marketing. And since graduating from Stern, I returned to Google. I successfully converted on my internship and returned full time upon graduation. And I've been working in marketing at Google ever since. Always kind of, as I mentioned at the beginning, always kind of the red thread of my career being creativity, storytelling, but on the behalf of like business strategies and initiatives. So I've worked on a lot of brands while at Google. I've worked on Google TV, Google Play. I've worked on the B2B side of marketing, a resource called thinkwithgoogle.com. I've launched podcasts. I've launched video series. I've launched more traditional marketing, like just TV campaigns, print campaigns, and the like. Yeah, I think that I think my experience it's an interesting example of how Stern really has all sorts of backgrounds, experiences, and skills that they bring into the class. And that translates to a diverse alumni population. I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I really feel like my friend group and my network post-Stern really reflects that sense of not just diversity in the traditional sense, but diversity in terms of skills and interests and careers, which just makes the network that much more robust and useful, both just from a professional standpoint, but also just from a personal standpoint. So would love to talk more about that, but that's a little bit about my background.
Got it.
Oh, and almost forgot the fun part of that question. Where was I when I found out about Stern?
Yep.
About getting into Stern. So I was actually at work, and I was sort of in the middle of all of the desks at work. So I couldn't really call all the people I wanted to call because, I wasn't ready to tell work yet. But I was sitting right near the door that went to our roof deck, but it was also, I believe, February or a very specifically cold month. So I went up there without a jacket with my cell phone and started calling everyone. And I was so excited, but I was also realized like, oh, I'm shaking. It's freezing. So went back downstairs, but it really sticks out in my mind. It was such a lovely moment.
Got it. So thinking back to when you were applying to business school, do you remember what your why Stern was, or how Stern ended up on your short list of places that you wanted to go for your MBA?
Yeah, I think it's really connected to a lot of what I just said. I think that I wanted a business career, but I wanted it to look the way I wanted it to look. I have a lot of creativity in my background and in my interests. And I just felt like NYU is on that like very, very short list of programs that I feel like really embrace what being a business professional can mean, and how it can be as traditional as you'd like it to look, or as non-traditional. And even for those who pursue maybe like the more traditional tracks, I think that the bankers and consultants that I am close with from graduating they don't fit any stereotype. They really approach their career with like a lot of that EQ that we're talking about. I just think the student body, no matter what they pursue or what they're interested in, it does have that like really specific level of creativity and camaraderie and yeah, and EQ. So I think, Stern really does a good job of naming that difference and making sure that that's like a difference that everyone's aware of. And then I think that does attract a certain student body, and everyone's extremely impressive, but they just feel really impressive in their own way. And certainly another point that you mentioned is that I think for those of us who are pursuing things that are, well, honestly, really any career, just being in the heart of downtown Manhattan also really adds to that kind of special magic and sparkle, while also, believe it or not, in no way detracting from that sense of like community and sort
Yep.
of all throw yourself in and just kind of black box experience. I think that you might initially think like, oh, if you're in the middle of the city, does that mean like folks just like come to class and do the recruiting and go home? Could not be further than from the truth. I was living in New York before I started Stern. My friends who lived in New York, my pre-Stern friends, kind of wondered a little bit where I went for 2 years, just because I really immersed myself in the clubs, in the activities, in the groups, in the friends, in the network. So it's really best of both worlds. You get that insular experience to whatever degree you want to really make for yourself, but you get all of the benefits of that kind of downtown New York magic.
Yeah. You're right. It is its own unique vibe, and this bubble, this cohort going through this very intense experience together, but also having the energy and all the opportunities that New York presents for sure.
Yeah, I would say that like other programs and which isn't to knock them, because obviously all of the peer programs are incredible, but I do think a lot of them have to organize like trips and like buses into the city in order to have sort of access to specific companies or activities related to recruiting. Whereas in New York or at NYU, you could just, go from class to a trek at a cool company and then back to class, so there was just like a lot at your fingertips, and it really made things really easy and dynamic.
Got it. Maybe a nice question to build on that. In what ways did you see Stern encourage collaboration and networking amongst students to sort of build that supportive community, this little mini community within the bigger New York City community?
Sure. I mean, I think it's twofold. I think one is there's just like a lot of actual tactical, logistical things that Stern does to really foster that. And that's everything from the student clubs, which are, of course, incredibly backed by the school and provide a lot of resources to make sure that those clubs can offer robust programming, but are led by the students. So it's that perfect kind of combination of like support and resources from the school, but driven by the needs and wants and skills and experiences of the students who end up in leadership in those clubs. There are events outside of the student clubs that are, thrown in partnership with the school administration itself. There's just like a lot of programming. And I think that I took advantage of as much of it as I could. I just remember spring semester, second year, turning to my now husband, boyfriend at the time, who I met at Stern, and saying like, there's actually not like a weekend off until we graduate, because there was just so much to do. But it was all, incredible. And I was really ready to drink from the fire hose the second I got there. It's 2 years. So, or however long it is, it's you have that limited time. So it's great to throw yourself in. So I would say that that's kind of bucket one. And that's like all of like the actual tactical things that are offered. And it's offered in spades. I would say bucket number two, which is just as, if not more important, is just like the pervasive kind of attitude and just sort of sentiment that I think that Stern fosters, that it's fostered by the school, and then it's continued with each class, which is just that this is how it's just encouraged that like this is how we are with each other. We are here to build community. We are here to support each other. Really, the whole point of a successful MBA program is to have a lasting and substantive network that goes beyond the term network and is really just about like people and the joy of that. So, Stern says it to you the second you arrive, and they say it throughout your time. Like these classmates of yours, this is your Stern family, and so we should all be doing everything we can to support each other, and that in turn ends up being support for ourselves. I will say that like you do end up you end up having friends at other schools, and you end up recruiting with people from other schools, so you do hear things anecdotally, and I do think that we have a reputation specifically at Stern of being like especially a place that fosters that kind of community and support of one another.
Nice. Thinking back to when you were a student and reaching out to Stern alumni as part of your desired career transition, what were those connections like? How did you find Stern alumni when you were a student reaching out to them?
Yeah, I mean, I found them to be, just a continuation of that support system that I just talked about. Um, I don't think that like the recruiting programming could really exist without the strength of our alumni network. Not the strength and the passion and enthusiasm. I mean, every recruiting event, it's a collaboration between the Stern administration, the current student body, and the alumni at the target companies that are coming to either visit our campus or are hosting us for treks. So, I mean, it's almost like it is part and parcel of the recruiting experience is connecting with alumni. It's really part of everything. I think, yeah, I mean, it's truly how I ended up at Google because I networked with a current employee who was able to give me a online referral through the system, but I also participated in the formal recruiting program where there were coffee chats, and I really connected with a Stern alum who I do feel like was instrumental in kind of recommending me for an interview. We now co-run the recruiting program at the MBA internship recruiting program at Google now. So he was someone who I kind of looked up to from a career standpoint, who really helped me out then, who has now kind of become a good friend here. And I think that those stories are really common. I'm also really active in the Stern Alumni Council, and our whole goal is to create more avenues to reach out to the current student body and to the alumni community. So, it's something that I think everyone thinks of the second they graduate. I also just, continue to go to Stern events and programming for alumni, as well as just hang out with like all the people I know there. And when we're all like thinking about like our next step, our second job after our third, we're all reaching out to each other. So it starts at school, but it continues, throughout your career.
Got it. What were some of, I spoke about some of the clubs that are available that are part of like the community experience at Stern, professional affinity, and also kind of special interest. What were some of the clubs that you participated in and any very memorable experiences from any of those?
Yeah, I like probably did too many to be honest. But I have no regrets.
A common theme.
I would say that so some of the ones that I really connected with, I think the ones that I kind of go back to a lot and sort of always name check is Stern Women in Business. That was like a big one I was really passionate about. I think that the affinity groups at Stern are full of really passionate students, but what I think is even more important is that the rest of the student body is really passionate about supporting the affinity groups. So I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the programming that the affinity groups throw, like each affinity group almost has its like signature event of each year. I mean, they throw a lot of programming. Every club throws a ton, but each club tends to have like a big signature. And the support that I saw those affinity groups sort of signature event receive from the rest of the student body as allies and as friends, is what I think is so special. Because, those affinity groups are there for each other, but they're really bolstered by the rest of the community. So I do really want to call that out. And so from a SWIB standpoint, that was one that I was really involved in, was VP on. From a professional club standpoint, I was really active in the tech club, because that was sort of that was like the thing I was wanting to pursue. I also, more on the fun side, was co-director and writer of Follies, which is our like sketch comedy kind of
Yeah.
make fun of your Stern experience show that happens at the end of each year, which is truly like a very anticipated event every year, and it's really, really fun. And I think that Stearns is like especially amazing just because we're in New York, and I feel like a lot of the student body kind of have that sort of humor and EQ, so we really
Right.
apply it towards like roasting our
Creative spirit.
yeah, exactly. So those are just to name a few. I was also a block leader my first year and was involved in student government. Yeah, I mean the list is endless. All of them could be helpful. Like one, so don't make fun of me. I was also in the acapella group called Net Present Vocals, because what is an acapella group if not a pun? And I actually met someone in NPV who was a Langone student who was currently working at Google. So I was able to like kind of use her help with my application. So I call that out because it's like, yes, your career ones can really help your career, but you never know like what will come out of the more fun clubs, because like we're all there to pursue sort of like our professional dreams. So it's all top of mind no matter what you're doing. And that I think that's like a really fun part about the clubs is like it really like they're all fun, but they all can have different avenues to the goals that you're chasing.
Nice. Thinking about like some of the professors that you interacted with at Stern, any standouts in terms of things that helped or things that sort of furthered this IQ plus EQ dynamic and that might be influencing you today as a leader at Google?
Yeah, I would say they all represent that like IQ, EQ mentality. I mean, it's kind of like I was saying, it's really ingrained. I think one of the best things that Stern does is just they name it, they say it, they have the principles, that root it and they disseminate it. So it's like people are signing up for that in the experience. So I would really say it's all professors who perpetuate it as part of the culture. I'll highlight one teacher who I took one class of his and decided to take every class he taught, which was Glenn Oken. He is just such a brilliant mind, and the way that he teaches, you feel like it feels like it's just I was just like hanging on every word, like he's just so intentional. He doesn't just teach because he doesn't just teach the points he's trying to make. He weaves it into this story where you just will never forget it. Like he has some classes where there's like one particular class and subject that everyone's like, oh, have you gotten to that one yet? And everyone talks about it because it's like famous because it's this like long story. So he teaches entrepreneurship, but I would argue that it was through his classes that I felt like I gained the most robust and holistic sense of business strategy as a whole. So he's someone I want to call out, but just in terms of the IQ and EQ. It's just in the sense that I think a lot of the professors, they really buy into it, and then they really have a lot of fun teaching, which makes you have a lot of fun learning. I think they're just so motivated to make the classes not just a class, just like something more, something you can really connect to.
Yep. That has been my experience as well. I joined Stern in January 2023, so I'm new to Stern, and this is a second career for me. And I would say IQ plus EQ is not just something that is a student screening. It is certainly something that they select for when it comes to hiring faculty members and hiring faculty and staff. I felt it as an administrator and amongst my staff that it is something that every sort of constituency within the Stern community really embodies and lives day to day. I'm going to pause my questions for a second and just see, Neji, are there any questions from the chat that you'd like to elevate? If not, I'm happy to get back to my questions and Tibby and I can carry on. All right, this is from Christian. Hey, Tibby, maybe like yourself, I am a more non-traditional candidate coming from media. What are the skills candidates not coming from more traditional banking finance need to focus on building while doing an MBA?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I, for me, because I was coming from advertising and moving in client side to marketing, obviously, like that's all kind of umbrellaed under marketing. So I wasn't necessarily, I was pivoting from client side or from agency to client side, but I wasn't pivoting functionally. So one could argue that I could have just doubled down on marketing and that would have been fine, let's say. I think what's great about Stern is just that people, I mean, to answer your question, I think everything. I think whatever strikes you. Stern is a grade non-disclosure school. I think most of its peers are, and they really do that on purpose because I think if you were trying to recruit and wanted to use like your A+ average to help that recruiting, you would just double down in your functional strength, and there you go. And maybe you wouldn't really get to experience all these other functions that are going to be a huge part of your career journey, but would certainly bolster you as a business professional partly because of this grade non-disclosure policy, which I think is literally in service of making sure that students are well-rounded. And then also partly just in the general diversity of experiences and interests and just like knowledge hunger of the student body. I would say that like everyone just kind of took everything, and then maybe like I ended up having a concentration in marketing, finance and strategy. And I did finance partly because I was like, I'm not ever going to be a finance professional, but boy, does marketing have a lot of scoping and budgeting and P&L management. And, boy, is it going to make me a better marketer to have that. Boy, is it going to make me a better business professional, personal investor. Certainly strategy is like the bedrock of any function. I don't care what you do. So those were areas that I decided to kind of fill some of my knowledge gaps. I certainly would encourage others to do so, but I think more broadly, it's less about what your personal gaps are or what I think everyone should take. And it's more about like, what do you want to explore? How do you want to round yourself out? And Stern really allows for that. And it's very much a part of the culture of the student body.
Yeah, completely agree. An MBA is a significant investment of time and money, and you want to be focusing on the things you care about. And so that flexibility of the electives that you can choose and also grade non-disclosure allows you to experiment and really try some new things on. It's the one opportunity that you'll have probably as a working professional to really take that 2 years and invest in yourself and explore and try some new things. And it doesn't necessarily need to always follow like a perfect script or like a very narrow dimension. Like it it can pay to sample a little bit and lean into areas that you're unfamiliar with, but have an interest in, for sure. Tibby, now as an alum, like, how are you experiencing current Sternies reaching out to you? Like, what are those engagements look like when a current Sternie reaches out to you to talk about careers and networking and mentorship?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of come from all over. Like I said, I'm active with sort of the Google Stern kind of connection and alumni community. So student clubs will sometimes reach out to me to say, hey, can we plan a trek to visit Google? Or can we do a virtual event? Sometimes students reach out to me because they say, hey, I got your contact. And, my background's really similar to yours, or like you kind of ended up doing the things that I want to be doing. And can we have a chat? And, I just always I always make sure that if I can't help, I find someone else internally at Google, or if I speak to them and they need to talk to someone else. It's a pretty easy answer. The answer is when people reach out, I just do what I can to make sure that they're getting the things they need, and I do the same, because I want to talk to Sternies at Google about like the areas of the company they're in, or sometimes even like when I'm working with like partners on, like, I've actually ended up working with a Sternie when I don't know if I could. Yeah, I think I could. Yeah, this is public. I did a few years back, I did a podcast for Google, and I did it in partnership with a team at Spotify. And I ended up working with one of my really good friends from Stern on as part of that collaboration.
Amazing.
We
What a
kind of
small
agreed to,
world.
like, germinate it together. So it can be more of the traditional things that we're talking about in terms of just like networking, chats, career, but it can also be like projects and collaborations too, which has been really exciting. So it runs the gamut, but I'm always game.
Nice. Thinking back to sort of like when you started at Stern, when you graduated, and now with like the benefit of hindsight, what are some things you wish you knew before you started the program?
It's a good question. I don't want to like cop out, but I will say that there is a little bit of a benefit in, like, I had a great experience. So part of me just feels like I'm okay with what I went in knowing. I think I will say that a lot of times prospective students, or students who admitted, who are about to start, they will sometimes ask, like, what should I know before I start? And part of me will say, like, don't worry too much. There's almost like there's not a ton you can do to prepare. Like, the way to prepare is to, be excited, and to be prepared to create the experience you want. Maybe I'll put it that way. There's not like any specific golden ticket nugget of knowledge. It's more that if you want to have like a dive deep, do everything kind of, no free, not a ton of free time experience, like I had, and I mean that in the best way possible. It was not a lot of free time because everything I was doing was so fun and I was having such a great time of it. Then that's like the experience that you get to have and make for yourself. If you need to carve out things for your family, if you need to, basically whatever you want out of the experience, whatever you need to balance it against, I would just say, like, think about what that is, be intentional about it, and execute against those needs. That's all I'll say. I think everything else, there's not a lot you can prepare for, but in a good way. You get to show up and you get to let the experience happen.
Got it. Christian had another question in terms of networking and connecting with Stern alumnus or even current students, either as a student or even as a prospective student. What are some of your recommendations? What are best practices when making those sort of like cold outreach emails asking for a connection, or pitfalls, things to avoid?
Sure. I would say number one is because I do think alumni get a lot of outreach. And there are some cases where, like during recruiting season, I might not be able to talk to every single prospective student. I try. But like there could be a chance where I don't, but like I'll try to block and tackle and send them to someone else who's like a good fit for them to talk to. Um, I call that out because I think what's best is to, if you want to work at X company, I don't mean X as in Twitter, I just mean anonymous company, whatever company you want to work for, if you want to work there, don't just like, oh, I found a Sternie who works there, I'm reaching out. Think about like the area of the company you want to work in. Think about maybe if you see their background on LinkedIn or on the Stern Network, which is our own sort of network that we have, and see how their pivot might mirror the pivot you want to make, or see if there are other things in common. And then when you're reaching out to them, kind of highlight like, and it was like someone said before, I come from media as well. Like I see how you came from like an agency media background and you pivoted into this direction. That's what I'm interested in, because I think that just makes the outreach really specific and it shows the alumni exactly how they can sort of help you. I will say the most tactical of tips, I mean, it is so nitty gritty, but I love to see it, is when I'm given avails in the outreach email, like Tuesday it's this and Wednesday it's this, and then I can just pick the one that makes sense. So even just like bulleting out the avails, I just feel like it's such a small but like lovely best practice. Yeah, and pitballs are really just the tips in reverse, just kind of like just like a random cold email without a lot of sort of intention behind it. I think you'll just have like a little bit less success. Probably a lot of a lot of alums will still just take it. But especially when you're dealing with like a high volume, it really helps to make that specific connection.
And make it easy, like you said.
And make it easy.
Make it easy to book time. Got it. Victor asked, where do Sternies usually live? Where do they commute from? And what are some popular hangout spots? Now, recognizing that you went to Stern before the pandemic and things might change, and the best answers will probably come from our current graduate ambassadors. Yep. But when you were at Stern, where were people living in the city, and how did that play out? And how do they commute to campus?
Yeah, I would say a ton of students lived in the East Village. It's like a close enough commute, and it's a fun part of the city. And also Stern is, it's in the West Village, which I feel like, I don't know, there's something about the East Village that's maybe like feels a little bit more accessible as a student. So a lot of folks lived in the East Village, but a lot of folks lived in like West Village, Chelsea. There were definitely students all around the city, but I would say that like, especially for those who were sort of planning a move specifically to go to Stern, they kind of tended to choose those sort of downtown neighborhoods that were all around. A lot of folks found roommates like ahead of time through Facebook. I know a few students who ended up living in like the Palladium, which is like a dorm that, but I would say that that's less common. I think a lot of people like tend to just pick apartments. And we did hang out a lot at people's apartments. We hung out like at Stern a lot. We were just always on campus. There was like a lot of lounges. And then there was just like a bunch of bars near Stern. I don't know if Amity is still like a big Stern bar, but it was there. And that was kind of fun. There were like definitely bars where like you almost wouldn't need to plan to meet anyone. You could just like walk in at a certain time and like people would be there. Certainly a ton of hangs that were not drinking related. I do promise you that. That's why a lot of people were on campus, just because like we could just hang out in the lounges. And there were also just so many activities, club sponsored or otherwise, that like you just would always be able to see people at like that club mixer or that scavenger hunt or like that like corporate like there was just like so much programming that you never really had to, I mean, you just blink and you'd be seeing someone, which was just such a nice part about school.
Nice. thinking back to the application, right? So we ask for an EQ endorsement, which is like the Stern spin on a letter of recommendation. How did you select your EQ endorsers for your application? And talk a little bit about like what that conversation was like before you applied.
Yeah, so I was pretty lucky in my job before Stern that my boss at the time, he was someone that I kind of, when I was in my agency, I sort of created a role after having been there a few years, kind of identified something that I felt like the agency could really benefit from having someone in that role. And kind of pitched it to him and sort of I just saw him and identified him at the company as someone who was like really inspirational and just cool. And I was just like, how can I work with Scott? And so the latter half of my agency career was working under him in this new role. And so he was kind of like mentoring me because we were sort of creating this like agency capability essentially together. So he was kind of a mentor, but he was also, a lot of people say like your boss and your mentor and your sponsor should be like different people. And I do think that that's generally true, but like Scott just happened to be all three. So I was lucky. And so even though he was my boss, I was able to kind of tell him what I was doing and ask him for a letter of recommendation because I just couldn't have thought of anyone better suited to speak on my behalf. I know not everyone feels comfortable with asking like their direct manager. Not everyone has necessarily a unicorn manager relationship like that. That was, those are usually like once or twice in a career. But it's really just forgetting all the trappings of like hierarchy. He really believed in me and wanted good things for me. And we had like a really lovely personal relationship. So I do think that those are like great attributes. So it could be a coworker and it could be an old manager, but maybe someone who just like, I mean, we all, if we're lucky, we all have at least one person in our career who just like really gets our special sauce. And I think that's the person to go for. And now that I'm thinking of it, I think definitely that's the person to go for over the person that you're like, yeah, but like, wouldn't it be more impressive if it came from that person? I just don't think that's ever the right move. I think it's about the special sauce. Because EQ, like they'll be able to speak to not just your IQ, but your EQ and impressive titles. If they can't speak to that, then like Stern's not going to really get to understand how you fit the bill of EQ and IQ. And you really want to do yourself the service of letting them be able to see that.
100% agree with that. Better to have like a meaty, robust EQ endorsement that can really talk about like the how you work and the great things that you do, as opposed to one from someone who's higher up and can only really talk about you at a pretty surface level of your accomplishments and not the how behind it. Christian had a question about like working opportunities, and some of this is to defray the expense. So we have things like teaching fellowships and graduate ambassadorships. So that's folks like second years who work for the admissions department and help answer questions. But I'd also love to kind of pivot that question to talk about experiential learning and like Stern special projects, signature projects rather, and consulting projects. Did you take advantage of any of those opportunities when you were at Stern? And are there any highlights you can share from your experiential learning opportunities at Stern?
Sure. Do the trips count too?
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about trips too.
Okay. There are three that I can think of right now. One is, and this isn't quite what this kind of maybe falls under the larger umbrella, but there are a lot of case competitions, which aren't, I don't believe they're paid, but they have prizes. And in my second semester, second year, I realized I hadn't done a case competition, and I do feel like it's kind of like a cool MBA specific thing. And I was like, I got to cross that off my bucket list. And I ended up doing like the JetBlue case competition. Case competitions are, I mean, don't make fun of me for being a nerd. They're really fun, because they do give you like the cool prompt, you know, like they give you something that you can really sink your teeth into. That's like got a lot of like room for like out of the box thinking. And then you get together with friends that you choose and you kind of work on this project together. And it's kind of the way that like you wish almost like real life careers could be,
Yeah.
where you're just like given a problem and free reign, like no stakeholder management, like no like constraints of feasibility, like you just get to go for it. We did make it to semifinals and we got to go to JetBlue and like present in front of the CEO. We didn't win, so no prizes. The prizes were like you got tickets and trips, and it was like because
Amazing.
it was
Oh my
JetBlue.
goodness. Yeah.
But it was really fun. So I think case competitions are fun, even if you're not pursuing consulting. I think the groups benefit from people who aren't just consultants too, or pursuing it. I also did a experiential learning trip. So that was for credit, and that was to the Cannes Film Festival. I don't know if they're still doing that trip, but we had like a class a week leading up to the festival where we wrote papers on things in the film industry, and we had really cool speakers from the business side of the film industry speak to us, and then we got to go to the Cannes Film Festival and like attend and sort of see sort of the inner workings of a festival. So that was incredible. And there are a lot of they call them DBIs, like doing business in. There are a lot of trips like that are available that are so cool. And then one more thing that I did that wasn't a competition, it was actually like a consulting experience, like you mentioned, was at Hearst Ventures. So Hearst, like the media company, they have like the Hearst Ventures, which sort of invest in cool new areas and sort of incubate things under the umbrella of Hearst. And we got to do a project that's almost like a case competition, except we were actually we were paid. They hired us to do it. It was kind of like a stipend, but like I remember like kind of like a good one. And we got to sort of do all this work on a special project for them. So it was kind of similar to a case competition, except we were truly in earnest working with those folks. So those are the three I can think of, and they were all really kind of like MBA bucket list experiences for me.
Got it. Ari asked a question about waiving classes. And there's probably a technical element of that question, but I would say also with the benefit of hindsight, what are your thoughts on if someone has deep experience in an area of waiving a core class in favor of maybe taking an extra elective? And is that something you'd recommend, or are there certain circumstances where you would not recommend it?
Yeah, I actually do have an answer to this. Certainly if you are a CPA, I think like you can probably waive accounting. Like I think that there are some cases where it probably makes sense. But I had the opportunity to waive the marketing core class just because that's essentially the industry I was coming from, and I didn't. There were a few reasons for me. One is because it was part of the core. I felt like there was a shared experience in the student body with the core classes. So I didn't want to, I was kind of like, I just kind of wanted to sort of be completist about that shared experience. Two, I think certain subjects like marketing, there's the way it's taught, and then there's what happens in real life. And I think that there are things you can learn from both, like just really rerouting yourselves in certain frameworks that you don't have the benefit of spending a lot of time on in your career, because everything's moving so quickly. And I do think like rerouting yourself in frameworks and theories it can be great. It was an opportunity to like take a step back and really think about the fundamentals. Also, the part of the motivation was like a lot of the professors, because this is another benefit of being in New York, they have like this they have really cool networks themselves. So a lot of classes have these like really cool guest speakers, including famous ones. So there were just like really great guest speakers in that marketing class. So I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I don't regret it at all. So I think it's a case by case basis. I don't think you can make a mistake, but like, I don't know. I think in certain of the core classes, um, especially the ones that are kind of a mix of hard and soft skills, like, or not hard and soft skills, but like, there's really strict frameworks like in strategy and marketing, there can be, but then there's also a lot of the art. There's an art and science to certain subjects. And I think for those especially, like there's kind of always something you can learn by rerouting yourself in the subject matter.
Got it. Neji, any other questions that you'd like to bring to the front? Or I'll give the audience couple more opportunities to talk. If not, Tibby, I have a question for you as an alum, and you're sort of in that still new alum, first 10 years post business school. What are some activities that you're getting invited to and participating in? And I'm also curious if you've taken advantage of the opportunity that alumni have to audit classes at Stern.
Well, I'm going to be biased here because I'm on the Alumni Council, and a lot of these things are things that like the council throws themselves, or like we are the ones who kind of put a lot of this programming, well, in strong partnership, obviously, with the Alumni Office, of course. But although I'm not really involved in like that side of the programming, I go to a lot of the events. I mean, there's a whole part of the alumni network called Stern 10, and it's the folks who've graduated 10 years or less. We just had like a Stern 10 holiday party in Manhattan, like at the restaurant Manhattan in downtown. It was gorgeous. If you're familiar with the restaurant, and delicious and really fun. They get like big group tickets to like baseball games. There are, there's just like endless programming, and it's all extremely well attended. I will say that. But it's always a mix of years. So you might go sometimes and like maybe not see a lot of people from your class, but then you kind of get to know the other alumni, which has been a fun surprise. Isn't necessarily the right word, but I don't think it was like on my radar that I was going to keep making relationships after graduating. I thought it was more about like kind of preserving the ones you made, but I just keep making more outside of my class, which is a really exciting part of being part of the network. I have not audited classes yet. I know that is I know that keeps growing, but it's a cool opportunity. Basically, I'll let you speak to it more, but it's something I hope to do eventually. Maybe when things slow down. Right now, things are really busy, but like I think when I have the time, it's something I'd love to do.
Yeah. So this is a lifetime benefit for alumni, where you can come back and audit classes. And I think it is a tremendous lifetime value, to be able to like explore an area that you didn't get a chance to explore when you did your MBA, or maybe you're a few years removed and you want to make another career pivot or upskill in a certain area. It's an opportunity to stay like on the cutting edge and learn new skills. I think, I'm personally someone who did my MBA in the mid-aughts, and then did a midlife career pivot recently to higher ed. This is an amazing opportunity, like having that chance to explore different areas and support that through actual classes is a pretty incredible value, and long-term value of the MBA. We had one question from Rohan that I can probably answer about leadership specific programs for current students. And then Tibby, if you want to jump in with your personal experience. So some of this is going to come in the form of some of the core programming that a current student will get as part of launch and their core curriculum. So leadership in organizations and communication classes are part of that core. There's also a thing called Leadership Accelerator. This was developed by Nate Pettit. It is a living case. We bring in actors, and you are sort of the C-suite of a company, and you're going to go through a real live business case with actors that are going to throw curveballs at you, and you're going to respond in real time. And so this is leadership practicum. This is live leadership experience. So that's just a sampling of some of the leadership specific programming for current students, in addition to the leadership opportunities that are built into those 40 plus clubs that we have at Stern, right? Each of those clubs has their own leadership team and committees that are thinking about the programming, thinking about the strategy, responsible for certain areas of keeping that programming fresh and executed strongly. Tibby, anything that you'd like to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I would say less the one, or maybe not one, but a less formal leadership opportunity is just that there are a lot of group projects. So there's like a lot of opportunity to, you can take all of these sort of like formal routes, and maybe you can like bring that into a group project and sort of like Stern is such a safe place to be like, hey guys, do you mind if like I'm project lead for this, or if you're like Lindsay mentioned, like a VP in a club, you can pitch new initiatives, so you can sort of lead outside of the scope of your role. Stern is just like a really safe place to essentially like pitch for the types of leadership opportunities that you want. So yeah, it's a full menu.
Got it. All right. I think we have covered most of the questions that we can cover right now. I know Neji's been busy in the chat answering some of the more nuts and bolts questions about the admissions process. So at this point, I'm going to go back to the slides. Neji, if you could pull those up, and give a really high-level overview about the application and admissions process. This is going to be very high level. So if you want to double click on any of this, I highly recommend joining one of our virtual information sessions or a mock application session to learn more. You probably have gathered over the course of the last hour or so that IQ plus EQ really underpins everything that we do, including our holistic approach to admissions. Our evaluation of each applicant covers three major areas: your academic profile, your professional achievements and aspirations, and your personal alignment with Stern core values. When it comes to your academic profile, we're looking at your academic record. So this is going to be transcripts from any degrees that you've pursued, in addition to standardized tests. And at Stern, we're very test agnostic, whether you've taken the GMAT, the OG GMAT, or the focused edition, or the GRE, executive assessment, MCAT, LSAT, DAT, whatever test you've taken, we will generally take it. We're going to look at your overall highest score from a single test, and there's no disadvantage to retakes. If you're a non-native English speaker who has not completed a degree in English, we're also going to ask for a language test, the IELTS, or the TOEFL, or a Duolingo exam. In terms of professional achievements and aspirations, for achievements, we're really looking at your resume, and I encourage you to really highlight your accomplishments, quantifying any impacts that you've had. We welcome a wide range of experiences. For aspirations, this is where your short-term goal essay is going to come in play. We just want to hear briefly in your own words, what are your post-MBA aspirations, focusing on industry and function. And then finally in this bucket is the EQ endorsement, which Tibby and I touched on a bit. This is like a recommendation letter with a specific Stern EQ spin, and Tibby gave some really great advice. This isn't about choosing someone with the most impressive title. It's choosing someone who can really speak to your work style and experience. And finally, we look at your personal alignment with Stern core values. And this comes to life in the change essay and the Pick 6 essay. So building on Stern's change, dare it, dream it, drive it tagline, with this essay, we want you to pick a verb to fill in the blank. What is your personal change tagline and call to action? How does change show up in your work and life? And then finally, the Pick 6 essay. So this is our visual essay. It's a lot of fun to read. We hope it's a lot of fun to create. But this is an opportunity to describe yourself and share a bit about yourself using 6 images and captions to highlight the things that you care about, what you're passionate about, what drives you. We also offer an optional essay, and it's truly optional. This is a great place to address any gaps in your work experience, things on your transcript, anything that's not clear from the rest of the essay. We are currently reading and evaluating applications for our fall 2024 intake, with our final deadline approaching on April 18th. For those early birds who are looking ahead to the next cycle and fall 2025 matriculation, just FYI, we typically launch the new application midsummer, so late July-ish. And then we typically have 4 deadlines, with the first deadline coming in September through to the final deadline in April. Regardless of which deadline you apply, it really doesn't matter. We recommend applying when you're ready to put your best foot forward and submit your most competitive application. If you've liked what you've heard today and want to learn more, we've got some contact information on the screen here. I highly recommend going to stern.nyu.edu to read and learn more. If you go to the Meet With Us section, you'll see those opportunities, both virtual and on campus, to learn more and meet with Stern representatives. We also include information to reach out to our graduate ambassadors. These are current second-year MBAs who are happy to answer your questions and share the student perspective about the program. Tibby, any closing thoughts at this point? Nuggets of advice, wisdom.
I would just say, you know, I'm good luck. And once you get over that hurdle of admittance, you know, I'm just really, really excited for you. It's just, I mean, it's 2 of the best years of my life. I really, you know, it was just such a profound experience for me, and I'm wishing that for all of you.
Completely agree, and a perfect note to end on. Tibby, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your student and alumni perspective on EQ at Stern. Thank you to Neji for all your hard work to facilitate such great questions today. Thank you to GMAT Club for streaming, and thank you to the audience for joining, and I hope to read your application to Stern soon. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everyone.